Well, without any further delay, I will go ahead and introduce today's guest speaker. We're very fortunate to have Mr. Mike Barclay with us today. Mike Barclay is a native of Pocatello, Idaho. Do we have anyone here from Idaho besides him? Great. One hand went up proudly in the very back. Wasn't even any hesitation. He learned to weld as a teenager, and after welding in industry, he started his own company, Barclay Welding, in Paul, Idaho. That was in 1980. And he diversified, and about 5 years later, after they had added several services, they changed their name to Barclay Mechanical. 6 years after that, he moved to Manti, Utah, and started Barclay Mechanical Services of Utah, which was a sister company to the business that he still had in Idaho. They built both of these businesses around a couple of things. One is integrity. They're known for integrity. They're also known for the value that they give the customers in the work that they perform, and they worked hard over the years to be able to perform several specialty welding and repairs. They currently specialize in industrial piping, food processing, and petrochemical specialty welding. They employ approximately 100 people across Utah, Idaho, and doing work throughout the United States. In January of last year, Mr. Barclay sold the Utah company to three of his sons, Kenneth, Scott, and John. That was a few years after he sold the Idaho company in 2005, sold to the employees of that business. He remains with Barclay Mechanical Services as a business consultant. His wife is also with him today, his wife Susan of 38 years, and they have 7 children and 19 grandchildren. Both of them have served for years as volunteers in their church and community in many different ways. And I might also mention that Mike has received the Silver Beaver Award, which is the highest recognition the Boy Scout Council level can bestow on an adult volunteer leader. And with that, we'll go ahead and let you hear from Mr. Mike Barclay.
Just turn the mic on, maybe it'll work. I have a lot of dirt on Alan, so if he gives you a hard time, contact me. I can get you out of any trouble that you need. Thank you. I'm really grateful to be here today. I feel honored. I would really have enjoyed it if I had had the opportunity to listen to someone before I started a business. And today I'd like to tell you a little bit about my story and then try to offer a few things as suggestions that might help you. I grew up in Pocatello, one of 4 boys. We were pretty rough, and I think my mother automatically gets the celestial kingdom after having dealt with 4 rowdy boys. My mother always said that you need to make sure that you're not a welder. And then she'd take me and show me my dad's shirts with holes in them and his underwear with burns and holes in them. And she said, certainly that you're smart enough to do something besides welding. That's what my mother's first words were. So all of us boys decided we wouldn't be welders. My oldest brother's a CPA. The next brother, he's a doctor. And my younger brother and I guess we didn't listen as well. He has Barclay truck rebuilders. He builds semi-trailers that are self-unloading trailers. He rebuilds semis, and his business is still in Paul. Myself, I tried to get into medical school, but in 1977, when I first visited with Dr. Baylor at the University of Utah Medical School, my grade point average was about 3.89 from Brigham Young University. But at the time, they were trying to equalize things, and so if you were a white person, they only accepted so many white Caucasians in the medical school that year. They were trying to even the score, and so I couldn't get in that year. And for some reason, the stork kept delivering babies on our front porch every other year. And realizing that babies needed diapers and families needed to eat, I left Brigham Young University. I called my dad on the phone and I said, Dad, can you help me find a job welding? I had taken night classes from him at Idaho State University when I was just a boy. I started learning to weld when I was about 12. And by the time I was 16, I I thought I was a pretty good welder. I need to tell you this story. We had little business where we would go and replace boilers at Ore-Ida Foods, different Simplots throughout the international intermountain area. Also internationally, we also replaced some boilers in Canada. Well, I built some pipe stands for my dad when I was about 12 or 13. And my dad, now excuse the language, I sometimes speak welder, and I'm really versed in welder language, but I've tried to unlearn it over the years. Anyway, my dad was showing all of the welding students and other men at the Idaho State University. He says, "Look at these pipe stands that Mike welded. Oh hell, they're as good as any you guys will see." Oh man, my buttons were just popping because my dad, who was the best welder I know, was telling me I was a good welder. I found those pipe stands about 25 years later, and they weren't really all that good. Just thought I'd tell you that praise does an awful lot for people, and that works for your employees as well if you're going to be an entrepreneur. Well, I ended up starting my own business. I'd saved up $4,000, and I want you to know that that's just this much short of $1 million back then. It was a lot of money. I had a cutting torch, a grinder, and a little welder, and I hung out my little shingle Barclay welding in Paul, Idaho, in a little small shop. We did $120,000 worth of work that first year. And that was close to $1 million back then, too. Well, I don't know if you remember. No, you wouldn't know. You guys are still wet behind the ears. There was a year called 1983 when it really snowed. And in Idaho, the snow was a foot deep on the side of the telephone poles. The wind had just scattered it. That was the year of the thistle slide. Nobody was coming in the door. Oh, I needed about $8,000 to pay my bills. People owed me about 12, and I had a $96,000 note that I'd taken out to build a new building, and it was at 12.25%. You probably don't believe that, but Doug, you remember those years. I mean, you'd borrow the money and you'd have to pay 12.75. You can borrow money for a couple of percent right now, 2 or 3, tops probably 4. Oh, I remember thinking that, how are we going to make it? Well, I thought a lot about that, and my wife and I, we decided we'd give a little bit extra to the poor that Christmas. And I remember listening to my wife. She said, how much money did we have left? $200. And we gave 50 of it to the poor. And I remember my wife telling me, she said, "I've made the kids' clothes out of a bolt material." Our kids looked like the Sound of Music kids back then. My wife would sew everything out of the same bolt. And I've been using our food storage. It all worked out. About January of that year, Union Seed Company called me and they said, "I understand you've developed a little seed grain cart." Now, seed grain cart was one, they used to put all of the seed to plant grain in little 40 to 50 pound bags. And then they'd have a pallet of them on the back of their flatbed truck, and they'd rip them and dump them in the grain drill and plant a few thousand acres. Well, the wind would catch them and they'd have to go gather the bag on the neighbor's fence a mile away. Well, we came up with an idea that we'd build a big box. They'd just bulk feed the grain in. It was about 27 cents a bag for the labor and the material to bag these, to bag the grain. But they could dump it for maybe 2 cents a bag to just the labor to feed it into the big drill, the big bulk feeder. We called them either like a nurse tank or it would be a portable grain auger. We stuck a cable inside the pipe so that you could fold the auger over to drive it down the road. Then you just had to lift it up. The cable would slide inside the other pipe and it would align the auger. And they'd just start up the engine and they'd fill 10,000 pounds of grain. Do you imagine how many hours that saved them of labor to rip the bag open and dump it in the grain drill? They'd just start the grain drill up. It'd feed up out of the auger. They had a little flex spout. All of a sudden, everybody wanted them. That year, we sold about 40 of those grain drills. And I remember thinking, the first guy that came to me, now here's what happens when you're broke and your wife just chewed you out because you only have $150 left in the world. They came to me and they said, how much to build one of these carts? Got my pencil out, tight as I could go. $3,150 a piece. Is that too much? Build me 10. Whew, man, did the old dance and headed home. I was so excited. We had work. Their competitor, Mark Grain, saw what Union Seed had bought. What are you building? Tell me about it. Build me 10. Mark Grain saw that Union Seed was getting 10, and next thing you know, Union Seed wants 10 more. Then Mark Grain wants 10 more. By the end of the year, I'd paid my $90-some thousand note off on my shop and paid my shop off, and I had $33,000 in the bank. And I had to pay Uncle Sam so much money. I thought, what did he do for me? But I learned the importance of paying my taxes too. It was a great year. A year or so later, we got more out of the farming industry because our main goal was to get into the food processing industry, the sugar industry, because that's where we could really be involved on technology and innovation, and it gave us a great opportunity to make some more money. Well, we got an opportunity to bid a small job for the Lamb Weston Company in American Falls. We got the chance. They came to me. They brought me blueprints. They said, you've got 10 days to bid this, and we don't think you stand a chance of getting it, but we're going to allow you to bid it. Well, got my pencil out, got on my knees, and I said a little prayer. This is also important, and I want you to write it down. You've got to be close to your source if you're going to get inspiration. And I know we live in a world where they don't like us to say God, but believe me, I've asked him for help my entire life, and I've always gotten it. I think that's important. You got to be right inside if you're going to hear those things that tell you what to do. So I put it down, $186,000. It was either 186 or 178, but today can we say 186? It was about $180,000. Next thing you know, one of the vice presidents over engineering shows up at my place. And he says, can we spend an hour reviewing these blueprints? And I says, well, did I do something wrong? No, I just want to talk to you. So he had me review exactly how we're going to do the job. The next closest bid was well over $100,000 more than mine. And they really wanted to save the money, but they didn't want to give it to me and have me stop halfway through, realizing that I'd bid it way too low. Well, as I had explained it to him, I told him, he says, how are you going to get 10 semi-loads of equipment inside this building? Are you going to tear the wall out? Are you going to, how are you going to do it? What will it cost you to rebuild the wall? And I said, well, let me tell you what I was thinking. I gave a family home evening lesson to my kids a long time ago, and it told the story about how this semi was driving along and it had wedged underneath the underpass, the overpass, and a little boy rides up on the bike and says, why don't you just let the air out of the tires of the semi and just drive it loose? It was only a couple inches difference. And I think the lesson was on basically communicating and listening. And I told him, well, I've got my crane. You've only got a 13-foot, 4-inch door. My crane is 13.6. I'm going to let some air out of the tire of my crane, drive it through this opening, and now I don't have to spend $80,000 rebuilding the wall of this building. And now I've got my crane inside. We'll just back the semi that can fit in there, fill the air in my tires, swing them in place. We did that job. We did that job for about $80-some thousand. I made $100,000 almost on just that one idea that came into my mind on how everybody else was bidding tearing the wall out. So there are so many things, if you want to start your own business, that can guide you and direct you and help you, but you've got to be right inside to hear those little whisperings that come. Whether it's things that you've learned before, in my case it was just a story that I'd read to my kids before, but it came to me, and that was a pretty nice family home evening lesson that made me about $100,000. Well, while I was there with this company, and I don't know if now's the time to tell it, but I think it is. When I was there working, they were installing some really neat equipment. And when I was there, a competitor came and said to me, "Will you steal some blueprints that are sitting in your work area?" And I said, "No, I won't do it." And he said, "Well, you've done so many $250,000 worth of work for us. If you don't act dishonestly, then you won't get any work from us." I remember going home and my wife says, "What is the matter with you?" And I told her, I said, "Oh, I'm okay." "Hey, you're not okay. What's bothering you?" And then I told her I'd been asked to be dishonest. And I said, "Gosh, this is the only way we're making money. I just don't know what to do." My wife gave me courage. I'd temporarily had just a time of insanity. She says, "What do you mean you don't know what you're just going to tell them? Heck no, we're not going to do that." "Yeah, that's what I'm going to do." I was glad my wife gave me some courage, because I was so despondent, thinking all was lost, knowing I couldn't do it. But I had courage. Went back, told him, I said, "I'm absolutely not going to do that." I said, "You know that's not right." I said, "You wouldn't have any respect for me. They wouldn't have any respect for me." He smiled and he says, "I told them you wouldn't do it." I was glad of that. Well, we finished our job. Someone was dishonest. I have absolutely no idea. Well, I do have an idea, and it came out in the future. The company who did take things, they were kicked out of the company to work contractor, could not do any more work for the company we were working for. And here's what's really interesting. The guy who'd asked me to be dishonest approached me 3 years later. And he says, "We have a pilot plant that we are building that has top-of-the-line products that we're going to be developing." These were different potato products. And he said, "The president of the company has asked Barclay Mechanical to build that plant." And I said, "Well, why are you asking me?" Mr. McGillicuddy, we'll call him that. And he said, "Well, because you're the only contractor we've ever dealt with who is totally honest." And so we got a $5 million job just for being honest. Write this on your plan. Write that down. Integrity always pays off. It may take a year or two. And those without integrity always lose. Write that down and just remember it. We've done some work for Amalgamated Sugar Company in Idaho. Tens of millions of dollars. They give us the work because we're the only company that, as they have reviewed our reports, we fill out a report, time card for every man. As we've reviewed those reports, as they've reviewed the reports, we've never added an extra guy or extra hours for anything. If I can't make money on being honest, then I don't want to have my own business. Does that make sense? I think integrity is something that you really want to write down. Well, I had a couple other thoughts I wanted to share with you. And that would be, how do you know who to hire? Your employees. A company is no better than the people they have working for it. And let me just give you an example. I had a really great guy working for me. I just love him. Just a really great guy. He was a superintendent for me and handled jobs. But he'd take his kids with him in the company vehicle, which that was allowed. Well, one day he brought the vice president of a big company with him in his truck, and the vice president called me and he said, "Have you ever seen the inside of this guy's truck?" It was a company truck with Barclay Mechanical on the side. And I said, "Honestly, I haven't. Why?" He says, "You need to get somebody to clean it out." So we brought it in the shop, and 3 big 50-gallon garbage dumpster cans later, we had his truck cleaned out. And to this day, whenever I see this vice president of the company, the first thing he tells me is that guy still working for you? Did he ever learn how to clean out his truck? It's important that you train your employees, and remember, if your employee has Barclay Mechanical on his hat or your business name, he represents you. So here's a few things I want to try to teach you about employees. We figured that we've spent at least $200,000 to train every superintendent or main leader in our company. It's cost us close to $200,000, some of them more. So we don't want them leaving and going to work for someone else. We've invested a lot of money in them. Okay? So you have to treat your employees fair. Okay? We have a bonus system that we pay them a certain percentage of the profits of the company. So we have profit sharing. We buy beef at the county fair. We butcher it, and we give a lot of that away. We give them a truck. Hopefully they'll keep it clean. So they have whatever benefits that we can. But I wanted to share this thought with you about the pipe stands. I think people, and this is my own opinion of 33 years in business, people appreciate a thank you and a pat on the back, and wow, what a great job. That goes a lot further than a $1,000 bonus. I'm not saying don't not share the money, but please never refrain from praising your employees. It makes all the difference in the world. You want a good, loyal employee? You always tell him how much he means to you and how much you appreciate the extra time he puts in. Now, I'm going to scare you for just a minute, but this is important too. If you think it's a bed of roses having your own company, then I think it's important that you understand that it's not. Okay, I'll give you an example. 2008, we got a job where we had 33 men just at the Holly Oil Refinery. We had 20 of them in Idaho at the time. We were scattered everywhere working on these plants. Well, I put in about 3,350 hours that year, going to different jobs, checking, bidding, attending. Now, if you work for the government, no offense, guys that work for the government, how many hours do you put in a year? Who wants to be brave enough to tell us? Alan.
Full-time employee of 40 hours a week is 2,080 hours.
That's if they don't take any time off.
Yeah, that's...
Now, but if they take off Christmas, if they take their 2 weeks vacation, they're probably lucky to get 2,000 hours. Am I being fair?
Very fair.
Okay, so if you worked 3,350 hours, how many extra months did you work in that year? Well, if it's 2,000, 3,000, so I'd say you worked about 7 extra months during that year. So just remember, if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to put in some hours. I've got a daughter who married a BYU law school graduate. This kid's amazing. He's brilliant, but he went to work for Price Waterhouse and Cooper, and he got a feel of what it's like working for somebody else and putting in 3,000 hours for the year. For his 70, 80, 90,000, I don't know what he makes. But People put in the hours, and it puts a real strain on your family. Just think about that. It gets better in time, but if you have your own business, Del Bryan, you know how that is, don't you? A lot of hours. It's a great entrepreneur right here. Okay, I want to take just a minute and talk about a couple other things. Remember that, it's not all a bed of roses, but it can really be beneficial. And let me tell you, I have always had the philosophy that we give back. And I'll just tell you a couple things, and this is not being boasting in any way. I'm just telling you that we give back. For example, a few years ago, Manti High School really needed a football stadium. And so they bought Cedar City's old football stadium. I helped. We trucked it up here, used our crane, our welders, and we welded together Manti High School's football stadium. And it was a donation from our company of $60,000, $80,000, somewhere in there, to put it together. It was a great tax write-off, but we had had some good years, and we wanted to give back. It can be something as simple as the sleds that the men stayed after work and built for the football team to push, or the soccer goals that they made for the city. If you're receiving and being blessed to have a really good business and income, I want you to write down, give back. Give back to the people. I think that's a very, very important thing for you to learn. I want to talk with you a minute, too, about innovation. And write down there that you need to stay at the front cutting edge of new inventions. And I'll just give you an example. We would bid X amount of hours for a pipe, 6-inch Schedule 40 pipe in an oil refinery. Takes X hours to cut and bevel and tack and fit, and X hours to weld it with your stick welder. A few years ago, Miller came out with a new wire feed welder that's called the Pipeworks system. Oh, they're good, but they're between $12,000 and $15,000 a piece. And so in your mind, you're thinking, whoa, that's a lot of money. But you can set them up, you can put them on a positioner, and you can tack together and weld in 30 minutes what used to take you 3 hours to do. So if you're bidding X dollars per joint, so now you can split the difference between how you used to bid, get the job, save the customer money, and still put twice the money in your pocket that you did before. So you have to stay on the cutting edge of technology. If you're an entrepreneur, you don't want to be bidding with bows and arrows when everybody else has got machine guns, if that makes sense. Okay, now another thing I wanted to share with you is we just bought a couple $100,000 plasma table. And I have a son who's got his master's in engineering. And you know how these engineering geeks are. You know, he's a Snow College graduate. You know how he is. But it's just amazing to see, Dad, we should buy this table. Well, all right, it's a couple $100,000. Well, what brackets that used to take us an hour and a half to build, he cuts out in 93 seconds with the plasma table. It just pays for itself. And the cost of production goes down, customers are happy, and you're happy too because you're actually making more money. So I'm telling you, stay on the cutting edge of technology. Now the next thing I want to tell you before we open it up for questions is perhaps the most important thing I'll tell you, and I hope you write this down. It was about 1987. We were installing some Moino pumps. We had built some new pumps to pump the potato peels after they come off the steam peeler across the street so the Simplot company could make alcohol, ethanol alcohol, out of the little potato chips and the potato peels. And as we were there on a weekend when they were shut down, and I had about an 8-man crew, and I was covered in potato stuff, and it doesn't smell real good by the weekend, by the way. So here I am all covered and getting the crew going because we had a certain window to get these pumps installed. And in walks this short, squatty guy with a straw hat, ruddy complexion, big blue eyes, and he walks right up to me smiling. Any of you guys ever heard of Bill Gates? Wasn't Bill Gates. Back then, it was one of the richest men in the world, and his name was J.R. Simplot. Is there anybody in this room that's ever heard of him? Let me tell you about J.R. Simplot. I think he's passed away. His son Scott runs the company, but he owns phosphate plants up in Soda Springs area. So he sells fertilizer to the potato farmers. And the potato farmers came to him and they said, "We're tired of paying so much money for our fertilizer for the potatoes." And he says, "Okay, so then I won't pay you so much for your potatoes." They were in a real bad situation because they had to have his fertilizer to grow the potatoes, but they wanted more money. It all worked out. This is the kind of guy, he spent a bunch of money. Now he's got a satellite that he owns part of. They take pictures down here, and they can tell how many acres of potatoes were planted just from the satellite pictures. So he can know what the demand's going to be on his fertilizer. So he's a pretty smart guy. I had so much respect for him, and here I am standing in front of him on a Saturday afternoon late, covered with potato juice. And he walks up to me and he says, "Hey kid, you own Barclay Mechanical?" "Yeah." I was real brave. I was, I was 32 years old by then. Yep, well, maybe 31. He said, "I've heard a lot of good things about you." And you know, the first thing he said was, he said, "We appreciate you being an honest company." Well, it really hit me, because here's almost the richest guy in the world that talking to me. Put his arm on my shoulder. He said, "Kid, I want to give you some advice." So right now I'm all ears, and these are pretty good size ears. I could hear really good. He says, "I can't know everything, so I hire people who do." That burned deep in my heart. You can't know everything. Probably not proper English. But you can hire people who do. But you're going to have to learn enough about your business that you can understand. But whatever you don't understand, realize you can hire people that can and do understand. Treat those employees good, reward them properly, and you will be successful. As far as customer demand goes, you don't want to open up an ice cube factory in Alaska, right? So make sure that you open up your business, whatever it is, in a place, determine that you have great demand, and you can be successful. I'm really excited to have had the opportunity to talk with you today, and I probably haven't said anything profound. I've tried to be as honest and open as I know how. If you work hard, if you offer a good quality product, customers need to know that you care about them. If a customer knows that you care about them, they'll come to you even if your prices are higher. If you talk to them, if you treat them like they're part of your family. But the minute you gouge a customer and charge him more than what is a fair price, that's going to bite you for years to come. And remember this: the sweetness of a cheap price turns awfully sour if it was poor quality. Give good quality. I can't tell you how many times I've lost thousands of dollars having to rebuild something that was almost good enough, but I'm so glad that I didn't say this is my final product. But I went back and redid it. We ate whatever it cost to fix, but the customer was happy, and he called me back to work again. Good luck, work hard, and may God bless this America. We need you out there. We need to bring jobs back to our country, which we can do. if you'll dig in, work hard. Entrepreneurs are the foundation of this nation. God bless. Take care. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? We can maybe have questions for how many minutes, Alan? About 5 or 6? 10 minutes. All righty. Don't everybody raise their hand at once. We'll start here and then here. I did a few little radio ads, but honestly, nothing beats knocking on the door, shaking a man's hand, telling him what you can do, and asking him to give you a chance. But radio ads, probably over time, we've done yellow pages, we've done different flyers, but advertising is a big thing. But nothing really beats just shaking a guy's hand. Go ahead. We changed from a sole proprietorship in, I think, 2005 to a corporation. As a sole proprietorship, 30, 35 employees. Okay. He asked, how do we advertise? And I told him nothing beats shaking a guy's hand. But we do use radio, and we did some yellow pages. We've done newspaper. But with our business, it really doesn't do a lot of good for radio ads. We do radio ads because we support the greatest radio station people in the state. I love KMTI and Doug Barton. They give so much back to the community. But our biggest advertising is you have to go talk to people to get the work, these type jobs. And the next question was, when did we change from a sole proprietorship to a corporation? And that was about 5 years later. There are real benefits to have a corporation as far as liability. When I talked with the accountant and he told me, you get in a wreck with your car and you're going to leave your wife zero if people sue you as a sole proprietor, then we decided we better incorporate. We did that for more legal protection. Thank you. Go ahead. How did I invest? The initial $4,000. How did I invest the initial $4,000? $550 for the month's rent, $550 for the next month's rent, $600 to rent the house, and a deposit on some oxygen and acetylene bottles. I think I must have had $200 or $300 left over. Go ahead. Okay, to start your company, as soon as you're through with college, what advice could I give you to start your company? The advice I'm going to give you is not to wait till you're through with college. The advice I'm going to give you is start thinking now. Get the best education you can. I'll tell you one class that I took that everybody thought I was crazy. Here I am, a returned missionary at BYU, and I thought, I want to take some kind of an accounting class. But the only one available was family economics and home management at BYU. Oh, guys, it was great. I was the only guy there with 32 girls. My dad said to me, he says, have you seen any girls you like? And I said, oh, Dad, I like them all. He reminded me that it wasn't Brigham Young's time. You had to kind of narrow down to one. So I found the prettiest girl in Idaho, and I begged her to marry me, and she said yes. Yep. I need to compliment. Here's a little bit of advice. And this is marriage advice, not business advice, but boy, does it fit. Believe me. Okay. Girls, do you want to marry a lazy husband who sits around and lets you do all the work? Guys, do you want to marry a girl that's not going to be at your side? Not really. I got the best of all worlds. I got gorgeous and hard worker all in one. So, honestly, I'm teasing, but boy, that's a big problem. If you own your own business and you're working really hard, and if your wife doesn't understand what it takes, it's going to cause some grief. So, you have to work together. My advice for what to do, I would take every class that you could that would help you in your business. You've got to have accounting classes. I can't see how you're going to get by without some form of math classes, whether a lot of algebra. In my particular business, we use trigonometry and algebra. We bought our first computer for $4,200. It was not IBM. This was a Columbia. It had yellow letters on the dark brown screen. Oh yeah, this was top of the line that I could afford. And guess what, guys? It was 10 megabytes. Oh yeah. You want me to tell you about my first calculator in my chemistry class? $104. You can buy one at Walmart for $3.99 that did the same thing. Yeah, I'll tell you. Get all the education that you can. It makes all the difference in the world. Even your English classes, you'll have to write resumes, letters. You need all the education you can get. It all fits in. Any other questions? We got a couple more minutes. Did you have a question, or were you just... Okay, don't dare move, do you? Okay, let's try you first, and then we're coming to you.
In the world we live in now, a lot of people are a lot less likely to take, stock in your company in exchange for services and products. So as I'm starting my company, I need a programmer and I need, some hardware developers, but none of these people are going to take anything other than hard cash. How do you get around that?
So when you start your company and you need people, you need their skills, how do you get around giving some ownership to them?
I'd be happy to give ownership. I don't have money. That's what I don't have. And frankly, these are all people that have been in the market we have nowadays, they are so used to being, skimped and screwed over that they just will only accept cash. I don't know how to get around it because I don't have the capital.
That's a really good question. Although I can tell you, you can do a lot more with less than you think. And I'm a living example of that. One thing also, you've got to find people to answer that question, people who are willing to postpone, well, let's call it gratification or reward for future greater rewards. And we live in a world, like even my children, except for one, all my children want newer houses. My wife and I lived in $100 a month rental. I could skateboard from the bathroom to the kitchen. It was slopey floors, but it was all we could afford. And the bond we developed between each other, struggling to dig up out of the bottom, it's lasted 38 years, and she's still keeping me, and I'm grateful. So I think it's hard to find people who are willing to postpone rewards now. I would say you can do a lot more with your money if you just got to find people who have that same vision that you do. And that's a really tough question because we live in a society where everybody wants a cell phone, everybody wants cable TV, everybody wants a brand new car. I hate to tell you what we've driven over the years till we could afford a new car. But I bought my wife a new Acura TL all-wheel drive only because she's never complained when she drove something a whole lot worse. You're next. I would say do a lot better than I did. I got a 2-year degree, I got an associate's degree, and as I was working on my bachelor's trying to get into medical school, nothing worked. So then I went and I did a 4-year apprenticeship with the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Union. And so I ended up becoming a journeyman plumber, pipe fitter. So mostly what I specialized in is the welded pipe, although we put toilets in as well. So, but that education has really helped me, especially in my mechanical contracting business, because it's exactly, I'm bidding exactly what I've done. I know exactly how long it takes to do it, but you need all the education you can get. I have a few sons with master's degree, and I've got a daughter that's getting a master's, the others with bachelor's degrees. Although my son Kenneth, that's got the master's degree in engineering, it's really helped him. Scott, who's got the bachelor's degree in business, you know, he's really sharp financially. So I think it's different for each person, but I would have to be a firm believer of getting all the education you can. But don't be here when you're 35 either. Mike. I'm just going to say amen to that because that's so true. Any other questions? I think we're out of time. Oh, Mike didn't really ask a question. I think he made a statement which was true, and that is you've got to have a partner with you that's willing to live with the demands that it takes. Thank you very much, and success to you.